I thought my husband's gift was the dinner, the flowers, the dress he'd laid out, even the soft music waiting when I walked downstairs. It all felt planned to the smallest detail. But when the door opened and his 3 friends stepped in, smiling like they already knew something I didn't, that's when I realized I was the surprise. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second to like this video and subscribe. It's quick. It helps more than you think. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes after this night. I told him not to make a big deal out of my birthday. He smiled, said nothing, and kept that same quiet confidence all week. The kind that always meant he was planning something. By the time I walked downstairs, the house didn't feel like ours. The lights were lower, the table set for 4 instead of 2, and soft jazz floated through the air like it had been waiting for me to notice. He was already there in a dark shirt, sleeves rolled, looking too calm. On my chair, a silver box. Inside it, the dress sat in deep wine color, the kind that felt heavier than it looked. I slipped it on upstairs, paired it with small gold earrings and the thin necklace he'd given me years ago. When I came back down, his eyes told me I'd made the right choice. Then the knock came. 3 of his friends, the ones I'd met only a handful of times, stood at the door with a bottle of champagne and smiles that didn't quite match the tone of the evening. They wished me happy birthday like they meant it. But there was something else in the air, something none of us mentioned. He said they wanted to see how you'd react. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. The room felt smaller with them inside. Their laughter came easy. Mine felt borrowed. As he poured the drinks, I caught the look they exchanged, the kind you almost miss if you aren't looking for it. And that's when I knew whatever this night was, I wasn't just part of it. I was the center of it. The first glass went down too easily. Maybe it was the bubbles. Maybe the way they all seemed to be waiting for something I couldn't see yet. The conversation stayed polite. Old stories, inside jokes, glances that skipped just a little too quickly past me. He kept watching me. Not protectively, not possessively, just observing like the night was a test he already knew the answer to. I smiled when one of them complimented the dress. Another asked how he'd managed to find someone who still blushes at compliments. It was harmless, almost. Dinner arrived like an intermission. Too neat, too quiet. They took turns refilling my glass, asking questions that never felt random. Each one circled closer to me, where I'd met him, what made me say yes, what I'd wanted that night. At first, I thought it was just curiosity, the kind friends have after a few drinks. But then I saw it. The way he didn't stop them, the way he leaned back, smiling, letting them take over the conversation. It wasn't spontaneous. They were following a plan. When the youngest of them leaned forward and said, "He told us you'd handle surprises better than most," my pulse caught. I didn't deny it. He just said, "Sheetos." And in that instant, I understood this wasn't about the dinner or the dress or the compliments. It was about seeing what I'd do once I realized the night was already written. The silence that followed his last word wasn't empty. It was loaded. 4 pairs of eyes, one question hanging between us. I could almost hear the sound of their restraint. It hummed louder than the music still playing somewhere behind the dim lights. I stayed seated for a moment, letting the quiet do the work. One of them shifted in his chair. Another cleared his throat, but no one dared fill the space. When I finally stood, their focus followed me like heat. The table still held traces of dinner, half-finished glasses, melting ice. A candle burned low enough to drip. I gathered the plates slowly, the satin of my sleeve whispering against the tablecloth. Every small movement felt magnified, deliberate, the sound of a decision forming in real time. He watched, elbows in the chair, arms, expression unreadable. I caught the faintest hint of pride there, or maybe worry. Either way, it gave me something to play with. I didn't speak until the kitchen door swung behind me. There, with the hum of Thefridge as my only witness, I took a deep breath and decided, if this was his surprise, I'd turn it into mine. When he came back, the mood had shifted. They were waiting. Stiff postures, eyes that couldn't quite settle. I placed each clean glass back on the table like setting pieces on a board. "So," I said, keeping my tone calm, measured. "Who's going to explain the part one wasn't told?" No one answered. The youngest looked to my husband, who only smiled faintly, as if silence were the plan. That was his mistake. I stepped closer to the edge of the table, the candlelight catching the wine tone of my dress. "Then I'll explain it for you," I said quietly. "You invited me to my own surprise, but you forgot who finishes the story." The line hung there, soft and steady. They didn't move, not even to breathe too loudly. It wasn't fear. It was attention, pure and absolute. I walked behind them slow enough for the scent of my perfume to trail between shoulders. No touching, no gestures, just presence, the kind that pulls gravity with it. By the time I circled back to my seat, the air had thickened into something I could almost see. He tried to recover with a chuckle. "You're taking this seriously." I tilted my head. "Shouldn't I?" Another silence, longer this time. I let it stretch until 11 the clock seemed unsure if it should keep ticking. Finally, I reached for the candle, pinched out the flame, and said, "If you all plan to watch, you can start by learning how patience feels." The room went darker, warmer. Someone exhaled. Someone else whispered my name. And in that dimness, every rule of the night shifted slowly, completely in my favor. Whatever he thought this gift would be, he was about to find out it belonged to him now. The candle was out, yet the room seemed brighter. The faint glow from the hallway drew lines across their faces, enough for me to see the hesitation I'd been waiting for. The air carried the heavy stillness that comes when everyone knows the next move belongs to one person. I stayed where I was for a while, letting the quiet settle into them. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't rise above a whisper. "Move the chairs back, all of them." They obeyed without thinking. Wood scraped softly across the floor, the sound sharp in the dimness. My husband watched, unsure if he should intervene, but I didn't look his way. Now I said, "Listen." The word itself became a kind of rhythm. No one dared fill the space between its echoes. I began to walk the room, slow steps marking the tempo. The dress brushed against my legs, fabric sighing with each movement. Every small sound became exaggerated. The shift of breath, the faint clink of glass, the distant hum of music looping from the speaker. I stopped behind the youngest, close enough for him to sense me there, but not enough to touch. "Still think this was his plan?" I asked. He shook his head before remembering I couldn't see him do it. "No," he said softly. "Good." I crossed to the next one, my shadow stretching over him as I passed. "And you?" He hesitated, then laughed nervously. "Not anymore." Their laughter died quickly when I smiled. It wasn't cruel, just certain. At the table, I traced a finger through a small circle of spilled wine and lifted it to the light. "Every one of you wanted to see how far this would go," I said. "But that's not how it works. You don't get to decide that." I glanced toward my husband. He didn't move, only exhaled, his expression a mix of confusion and awe. For the first time all evening, he seemed to realize he'd handed me the script, and I'd rewritten every line. I turned on one lamp, low and warm, enough to draw everyone's faces out of shadow. The light pulled between us, softening edges, showing the rise and fall of each quiet breath. "Look around," I said. "This is what happens when you plan something without asking who it's really for." No one argued. They didn't need to. The room itself had become my answer. I leaned against the back of a chair, steady and composed. "Next time," I said slowly, "if there is one, you'll wait until I tell you what you want, or you'll learn it this way again." The words landed heavier than I meant them to. No one spoke. Even the music seemed to pause between notes. Then I turned toward the hallway, behind me. I heard the faint scrape of chairs, a sigh, a whispered apology that it pretended not to hear. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. The night had been his idea. The power was mine. I still don't know if he expected me to take control or if that was the part of the surprise he didn't plan. Either way, the night taught him something he won't forget. Be honest. If your partner had planned a gift like that, would you have stopped it or let it play out? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It's the simplest way to make sure you don't miss what comes next.